Okay, so moving along with the meeting, again, today we have one item on our agenda, EACP-51, Water Delivery Systems. At our July 10th council meeting, Chair Lee referred this item to our committee. It was one of several Ag Working Group priorities that was referred to the committee. Today's report was a result of the Maui ESG and the Auerswald project and from the summit from this past January. This report provides a starting point for the development of an action plan for East Maui water that embraces environmental, social, and governance principles that support our community needs, while also addressing county priorities related to COVID and unemployment. The report also responds to a changing environment surrounding water usage and helps us to transition from 100 years of divergence to a system that benefits everyone and not just a few. More importantly, it acknowledges our responsibility to care for our ecosystem. On a much broader note, the report can be used as a template for responsible investing throughout Maui County. We were lucky to have the best minds on this topic. I will let the presenters provide their backgrounds and areas of expertise. On our agenda, we noted that we would have Ms. Shay Hodges, Professor Phillip Auerswald, Mr. Jerome Kikivi Jr., Dr. Swamy, Mr. Ian Chan Hodges, and Ms. Imogen Rose-Smith. So I'll let them introduce themselves to you all. Shay, you want to begin?
Yes, actually, what I thought we would do is, since everyone is going to share in presentation, that they can introduce themselves when we get to their part, so we don't kind of repeat it. Is that all right?
Sure, that's fine. About how long are the presentations? Should the members wait to ask questions, or should they ask questions after each presentation?
I think it might make sense to hear the whole presentation first.
Okay, all right.
Unless someone has a burning clarification question. That makes sense?
Sounds good. Sure.
Okay, so I was going to share my screen so we can see the presentation, see if this works. Can you folks see this?
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Okay, great. So thank you all so much for allowing us to make this presentation. As we said, we have Gitanjali, Ian Hodges, Phillip Auerswald, Junior Kikivi, and Imogen Rose-Smith also joining us. But just to kind of remind everybody, we received funding last year. The mayor put funding into the budget from the Office of Economic Development for the Maui ESG project and the Auerswald Investment Summit, and you folks approved it. And as a result of that, we had this summit on January 31 and February 1. And a lot of you folks were there. And basically what our goals were to increase community understanding of ESG, institutional investment, and private equity. And as a reminder, ESG stands for environmental, care, social, and good governance investment. We also wanted to bring in ESG practitioners and help them to understand our needs and our issues and our potential to be a model for community-driven ESG investment. And we wanted to start building relationships. And so all that, we are happy to say, happened. And on the second day of the summit, for those of you who were there, you may remember, our second, we had working group panel presentations. And we actually had 3 different working groups. One related, or 2 actually, for water finance and water governance, and then we had a sovereign wealth fund working group, and we had an electrification of transportation working group. And these working groups started actually communicating with each other and looking into these issues in October and November of 2019. And they included more people than were on the panel. You can see the bottom picture. Some of the panelists, Sam McCoy, Eva Blumenstein, Alohalani Smith, Representative Linda Coit, Gitanjali, who's presenting today, Ian Monroe, who is with a company called Etho Capital, and he also presented at the summit on another panel. And we also had other folks involved too, Eric Glass of Alliance Bernstein, Phil Glenn of Travoy, Michael Kramer of Natural Investments. And then when we presented the panel, there was a lot of community feedback. So out of all of that, came the report. So it was basically an outcome of the summit. We also had matching funds from a group called Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. So we were able to put together this very comprehensive 200-page report that you folks all should have received a couple weeks ago on your Granicus. And we're not presenting all 200 pages today. So we've cut it way down. And you can see the folks who are going to be part of the presentation. Professor Sarma already testified.
Wow.
And so basically, the full report that you folks got had an executive... Go ahead.
Hold
Was that... Did you say something, Councilman?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So the report that you have, I just wanted to kind of go over it quickly so you know what to go back to if you want to dive deeper after this presentation. It has an executive summary, which we're going to go over, a vision roadmap, which we're going to talk about in detail today, an economic analysis, stakeholder requirements, state of the water systems, the legal situation, and frameworks and best practices in technology. And today we're really just going to focus, we're mostly going to focus on the vision, the economic analysis, and the technology. The other three sections, the state of the water system is a very big section, very detailed, and I think most people really have a pretty good sense of the stakeholders. And then the legal situation, you can learn more about that in the big report that you received. So when you look at the executive summary, these are the key issues. Obviously, water is a public trust that many people feel are not being met today. Stakeholders are requiring significant changes to meet that trust. The infrastructure itself is very complex. It's non-standard. It's in a state of disrepair, and it's not currently meeting stakeholder requirements. There are a lot of legal issues and economic issues that are sort of creating a gridlock. Eminent domain, the legal options can provide some long-term solutions, but they can be time-consuming. We're not fully sure how they would turn out. So what we wanted to look at, how we can immediately make some changes that have a really positive impact in the community. So one of the ways is by harnessing technology innovation, just as Professor Sarma was speaking about, in terms of measuring, monitoring, and managing the water systems. And that can do a lot of things for us. First of all, like he said, it can restore the trust. It makes the data transparent. It can also be used for negotiation. And then there are other aspects like generating revenues and actually moving towards some other bigger major changes in our economic future. So we're going to discuss that more in the coming slides. So we had a vision and roadmap, and just sort of, again, to clarify what the major goals we have are to restore and respect tradition and opportunity, to address stakeholder needs, to have community-led care and sustainability of the watershed, an Ahupua'a values-driven approach to utilizing the technology and innovation, and ultimately for Maui to become a center for Ahupua'a-based ESG, environmental, social, good governance standards for sustainable agriculture, food security, and water innovation. And we have a 10-year vision. So that vision, again, was based on assessing the current state of the system and the legal constraints, a thorough stakeholder assessment, and looking at technology, ESG, and best practices from around the globe. And we divided that up into 4 work streams: technology, infrastructure, legal and governance, and economic. And when you go back to the 200-page document we sent you, you will see a very detailed roadmap for the first year, the second year, years 3, 4, year 5, and year 10. And this is meant to be a starting point for discussing it. So depending on how the community would want to move forward, obviously that roadmap would change, but it's meant to be a starting point so that people can sort of see, okay, how do we really make these plans and how do we move it forward? And just briefly, when we looked at the stakeholder needs, and I'm sure most of you guys are very aware of this, but, fair access is obviously a huge key, important need. Watershed management and stream care, the depreciation of the EMI infrastructure, monitoring and data, and not just stream flows, but rainfall, invasive species, traditional usage, impacts on the shoreline, and of course, supporting traditional uses, sustainability for long-term sustainable yields for the water, transparency, oversight, and allocation, environmental protection, private sector accountability, and water governance that represents all stakeholders. So when we were looking at this, obviously COVID happened soon after our summit, but some of these issues were issues even before COVID. So you obviously have the greater county and state priorities of now massive unemployment and a real need to rebuild and provide opportunities. Even before COVID, we had issues related to really fair economic participation, particularly when it comes to Native Hawaiians. We still, tourism provided us with, an economy, I guess, but it really didn't provide job opportunities for the future of work and really looking at technology capacity for our communities. Climate change obviously was already a problem, and food security, as we all know, was a huge problem. So when we looked at this roadmap, we took all of this into consideration. And this is an example of the 4 work streams. And throughout all of them, we kept these different values, I guess, or concepts in mind. So the Ahupua'a investment values, right? Looking at it from a Hawaiian cultural perspective and looking from a sustainability perspective. Innovation, really looking at what kind of technology innovations that are appropriate for our communities, what's available. And like we said, how do we develop this so that we can have environmental, social, good governance investment? Because to make any of this work, obviously, we need investment. And again, the plan that you guys have is a 1-year, 2-year, 3, 4, 5, and 10-year plan. We wanted to actually figure out, how do we actually make this happen? And in our view, the first stage is really implementing the community data technology. That's something that can be done right away. It doesn't require any sort of legal interventions. And we can also put people to work right away and build our capacity. It is STEM week. So we're looking at that. And then as we move forward, looking at governance and control approaches with the ultimate goal of transformation of the system. And now I'm actually going to turn it over to Phillip Auerswald for the economic analysis. Phillip, I can just move the slides forward when you tell me to, if that makes sense.
That sounds great. Yeah.
And can you hear?
I will do that. Yeah. Can you all hear me okay? Do you hear me okay?
Yes, Doctor, we can hear you. Are you able to mute your video, provide video for us today?
Oh, yes. I'll mute my video.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
We can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So thank you so much, Shay, for introducing me. And I should just say to start with that I'm, aloha, and I'm really humbled and honored to be part of this. Shay and Ian have impressed upon all of us who are not from Maui the importance of the process that we've been invited to be part of and its history, as has my cousin who grew up in Kula, and so I'm just speaking with him recently, and he had reinforced some of the same things. So thank you for inviting us to be part of this. My part of it is to discuss the economic dimensions, but on this slide, really the most important of the bullets is the third one, the social environmental impact, in the sense that the entire premise of the project is that we're thinking holistically about both the watershed, the communities, and really what the future might hold, given the resources that exists and the institutions and opportunities as they are. I think the other sort of top line point I would make is that I'm an economist by training, but my area has been entrepreneurship and innovation. I should say that I'm delighted to be working alongside Sanjay on this project. There are professors, and Sanjay truly is eminent in his field in Internet of Things and in technology and monitoring and some of the issues, some of the dimensions that we've been discussing so far. But technology nowhere has ever been a solution. It's only a tool. And it's a tool that can only be utilized in combination with imagination, with an understanding of reality. And that's really what we've tried to do here. And the reality part is the first two bullets, which is that we have to take into consideration the financial sustainability of a proposal in addition to the other dimensions of the project. So obviously that means considering revenues and costs as well as the overriding important dimension of societal and environmental impact. Shay, if you could go to the next slide. So this is a summary of the different dimensions of uses that we emphasized. We did try to consider how we could use the shared resources. Obviously, it's a small fraction of the land, but it is a significant element in the overall vision to create expand housing opportunities, low-income housing opportunities, as that was something that was identified. We looked quite a bit at frontiers in technology in terms of agricultural crops that are low water and high yield from an economic standpoint, and either already present on Maui or else appropriate to the setting. We've been talking about this important dimension of citizen science, and I am fully, in agreement with Shay's statement that this is an immediate opportunity, both to gather data and also to really inventory the status of the watershed and to create a working partnership with the community that is engaged in really the foundations of building trust, as Sanjay emphasized, which is the gathering and validating data. But those capacities then can extend to really rethinking tourism. There's a whole variety of sort of tourism 3.0, 4.0 approaches that are based on sort of minimal impact on the land, but is sort of enhanced tourist experiences that use a data-rich environment. And so I think that having a community that has sort of training in geospatial sort of data gathering is a set of capabilities that can even go beyond the issues of the watershed and the maintenance, and that continues on through agriculture and obviously the other dimensions of the food system. And taking into account all along, without obviously without doubt, the water resource. And I'll say a little bit more about this notion of a center of excellence. I think Sanjay alluded to it. Obviously, this is something that one would build toward, but in a moment I'll describe a model for what we envision as far as that's concerned. So next slide. Again, you have a copy of this presentation. You can refer to the details. The bottom line is that we looked very carefully and very seriously at the scenarios, perhaps proposals that Mahi Pono has advanced, and we in many cases used the same sort of projections that they used in terms of water usage for various activities, and so without really taking issue with some of the data fundamentals, we really focused on thinking about a portfolio of activities and trying various portfolios. What you have is the outcome of essentially one scenario out of a huge number of possibilities. But the point of that scenario is simply to document that in one case, without really pushing the envelope of water efficiency in agriculture, and agriculture is really the primary dimension of water use. That's obvious, and so I'll say a little bit more about that, but without even pushing the envelope on water efficiency in agriculture. We found that the land can yield 90% of the gross revenue that Mahi Pono has estimated to be attainable, while returning more than 30% of the water requested under the lease to the streams. So that means that 70% would stay in the system, but there would be 30% more accessible, to either just return to the watershed in a natural manner, or otherwise, be utilized for uses outside of the economic plan. And then next slide, please.
Professor Phil, can you unmute your video?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Okay,
sorry, wasn't clear about the instructions on that, but
thank you. And then, real quick, the chair wanted to recognize Member Sugimura. Welcome, Member Sugimura.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I was at a commission meeting. Thank you
for being here. Go ahead, Professor.
Great. Okay. So this is one overview, sort of a top line overview of the specific scenario that we focused on in the in this initial report. I should say that one of the things we've discussed is it'd be possible to really create an app almost that would allow the commission, the community members to experiment with different scenarios based on just some fundamentals. So we're not suggesting by any means that this is the answer. It's simply an illustration of what might be possible. And you'll see that the balance is in terms of water usage, as I said, is in the cash crops. Revenue also in the cash crops. We sought to really explore a much more, I think, to a greater extent than was in the Mahi Pono plan, the low water cash crops, and there are many options in that category. And then obviously we built in the affordable housing dimension. I mean, you'll see that affordable housing is a very significant amount of the capex and negligible on the gross revenue. But really, we see the real estate development, both the high end and the affordable housing, as being linked. And, there is an element of cross-subsidy there, which is not unusual in affordable housing projects. But overall, the activity is economically viable. Next slide, please. So this is, again, just one example of numerous examples that we looked into of a low water use cash crop. This is the Pongamia tree is one that's already grown on Maui by company Terviva, and so we have some evidence of economic viability, but again, this was one example of a use where we could see some significant revenue with lower water usage. Next slide, please. Solar is something that, again, we looked at, I think expanded from what had been suggested in the prior scenarios. And, one thing to emphasize is that when we think about solar, it's not these, square acres, square miles of just unbroken panels. That the frontier on solar technology, as I'm sure you all are well aware, is now one where mixed use is integral, and the solar panels and agriculture coexist, and so those are the sorts of, from an aesthetic standpoint, those are the sorts of options that we were sort of primarily considering or envisioning. But we do see that solar has real potential, in some of the former sugarcane lands. Next slide, please. And then finally, getting back to the notion of a center of excellence, the image here is of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, which is among the premier oceanographic institutes globally. Woods Hole is a small town on Cape Cod. It is not overwhelmed at all, I don't believe, by the presence of the Oceanographic Institute. But the presence of the Oceanographic Institute provides really a kind of a community center and a knowledge center that creates a different category of opportunity than tourism, which obviously is the dominant economic activity on Cape Cod. And one that is all season, that is sustainable in and of itself, and we see this as being really complementary with the sort of high-end real estate development that we've recommended, which would be a complete aesthetic of respect for land, water, and community. And that the nature of the research center would help to define the essence of the plan that we're proposing, and it would draw to the extent that additional community members were drawn to Maui. First of all, they would be few in number, but second of all, they would be drawn by this shared aesthetic. And just to make a last point about this notion of a center of excellence, that it would reinforce the crowdsourced science initiatives that we've been talking about, and be in some sense kind of an evolution of that activity. And of course, not a necessary evolution. The crowdsourced science activities are valuable in and of themselves, but we believe that this could be an endpoint that might bring a lot of the threads of the plan that we've suggested together. So I hope that some of that was used of interest, and sorry if I took longer than was required, but I'll leave it to Shay for the next one.
Can you guys hear me? I'm not sure if my sound is off.
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, good. I'm a little confused on the technology, but and now I'd like to introduce Gita Swamy, who's going to present the technology aspects and introduce herself. Gita, are you there?
Aloha, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Doctor. Aloha.
Fantastic. Hello, Shane. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to present a starting vision for the potential for what Maui could do. And I think technology forms the foundation for this compelling vision of the future of a smart watershed. So, I'm going to speak mainly to this slide, but what I want you to do is imagine a future for Maui where the community and the government can collaboratively act as excellent stewards of your land, water, air, and every creature who depends upon them. Imagine that we are able to know and measure the exact state of the ecosystem through the wonder of technology, and to monitor each choice and action that we take dynamically through a community-based crowd-to-cloud data measurement. Imagine that we are able to powerfully and fairly negotiate and collaborate with the outside world using the clarity and power of this technology-enabled awareness. Imagine that through these technologies, we can also account for all those externalities, costs, and benefits that are not factored into the commercial world today, and to correctly value and account for, as well as communicate, that which is important to us, our culture, our environment, all our people, and our ahupua, if I may say. Imagine that we can use this data and technology to create powerful new applications, innovations for a better way of life for everyone on Maui. Imagine that we can turn Maui into a world leader and center for excellence for how the world should negotiate the balance and purpose of human existence. And imagine we can create better livelihood with higher quality of life through a new kind of technology literate workforce, a community digital data worker that can immediately be trained on the job to start today and create a different kind of technology-based jobs and livelihood in Maui. More importantly, when we have developed the smart watershed, all the technology and data science that has been developed can also be used in a multitude of other settings. Not only are we able to just measure and monitor and manage streams in the watershed, but we can track invasive species. We can determine the data baselines for environmental impacts. We can monitor the OPE and the shoreline. We can track agricultural pests. We can use collaborative decision-making, simulation, and gaming where the community can participate in decisions and understand the impact of each one of these decisions through simulation. And the data that is garnered through this process can be used in turn to negotiate and collaborate with outside investors, partners, and visitors. That is the power of technology. And that is what we're hoping to take the first step towards. But this, I would urge all of you to read through this 200-page document, and I know it can be intimidating because it lays out the possibilities of what you can be, and it lays out the steps to get to those possibilities. Can you go to the next slide, Shay? And Maui is actually very well positioned to be a center of excellence for these smart technologies and related technologies in agriculture, because Maui is highly diverse and international. And Maui is also small and contained in area, allowing you to actually roll out technologies more effectively. And Maui is made of discrete power, transportation, and telecommunication grids. And so it can provide very valuable research opportunities with regard to climate change, biodiversity, and culture. Next slide, please. And more importantly, not only are we able to come up with solutions that have technology that creates better economics and livelihood, but we can do this with substantial benefits in environmental, social, and governance, or ESG benefits. ESG plays a cornerstone role. In fact, technology is an enabling framework for the development and for ensuring ESG goals can be achieved through measurement, monitoring, management, and innovation, understanding what you are doing at each point. And thus, we can strengthen the cultural and economic practices. We can create high quality jobs and jobs training. We can mitigate floods and fire risks. We can create a center of excellence that would incubate new ideas and new technologies. We can construct affordable housing and food security. But most importantly, we can create a model, for global model, for the stewardships of land, water, and air resources to strengthen our communities. So I will, in order to understand how we achieve this vision, which I've laid out, I will turn it over to Imogen to talk about the roadmap. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gita, and thank you, Shay, and thank you to the committee for holding this hearing today and allowing us this opportunity to speak. My name is Imogen Rose-Smith. I worked with Ian and Shay on the Auerswald summit that we held, which seems like a long time ago now, in January. And I am also affiliate of IoTask and a former Sustainable Investment Fellow with the University of California. So I will try and keep my remarks relatively short. But as you've heard from the others today, the purpose of this report is not to dictate, what Maui or the community should do, but rather set up a vision for what the community might do and start the dialogue and begin to sort of put some options on the table and envisage what this world might look like. And so as part of that, we laid out, as Shay mentioned at the beginning, a sort of detailed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10-year plan for what it might take to get there. And again, part of this process is asking the community to make this very much be a community-led decision. Like, what does the community want? And then, what are the resources that the community needs to make that a reality? And we very much wanted to put in place some roadblocks for how that can become a reality. So this isn't just, a nice idea, but rather sort of a practical guide to getting there. And, I recommend, even if you don't read the whole 200-page report, and why would you not want to, that you take a look at these slides, because I think they really make it clear this is possible, and this is doable, and some of it is breaking it down into bite-sized chunks, and some of it is much larger. And of course, all of this is going to take funding, and it's going to take investment. And that is going to come from various, and it's also, importantly, it's going to take decisions on the part of the community. For example, what does the community want to do about eminent domain? Like, these are questions that we certainly cannot and should not answer for you, but they are questions that the community needs to work through as part of this process. But again, as Shay pointed out at the beginning, there are actions and activities that can be taken right now that can result in the sort of technology and innovation that Gita was talking about, and can create jobs and start to sort of create the economic diversification that we've been talking about. So again, and the good news, such as there is any in the sort of current environment and the current crisis, is that the capital markets are very much open for business. There is funding to be found in markets, and there is investment, and there is not-for-profit investment. There are a lot of ways that various parts of this initiative and this vision can be financed, even in a COVID-19 environment, and in some ways all the more so in a COVID-19 environment, which certainly makes the urgency and the need greater. So here you have the sort of the 4 verticals, work streams that we present throughout the report. And again, you can see a lot of this is building on what the community is already doing, recognizing what the community is already doing, and in some instances, trying to find ways to economically reward the community for work that they're currently doing, often for free. And also sort of tapping into the resources of what is happening on the ground in order to leverage, enhance, and support that. So in the technology work stream, which is really what we've been talking about here, we could very easily envisage putting in a prototype, putting people to work, within months, doing the stream monitoring as part of a COVID-19 response effort, and that would include getting funding for those efforts, both potentially government funding and not-for-profit funding and other initiatives. As you can see, a lot of the rest of this sort of year 1 plan involves community engagement and really listening to the community and getting the feedback about what steps to take, and then going out and tapping the resources to make those steps happen. Next slide, please. So then, year 2 becomes, acting on that. So by year 2, if you have the technology work stream up and running, you've done a couple of pilot programs around the sensors, you can really start building that up into a business, something that's economically viable and can be applied not just to EAST-MAUI and the EMI system, but potentially more broadly. Year 2 also envisages finalizing a land use plan for the Maui Pomo land, and what the community might want that to look like and how to make that happen. And building up and supporting, this came up very early on, building up and supporting the digital infrastructure development, right? Like, how do we have a smart grid in order to have the technology innovation and support the communities in the way that they need to be supported? And again, there is capital available for all of these initiatives at certain prices, right? And part of the process is identifying who are those investors, who are their providers of capital, and how to bring them into the community in ways that the community wants and ways that the community benefits, and in ways in which it is sort of setting the rules of the road and ensuring it achieves the outcome that it wants. Next slide. So throughout this process, the idea is to have, a balanced, holistic system that can meet the needs of all the stakeholders, a long-term sustainable plan. That in turn is really important, because by having a plan, that means that you can identify what are the capital needs, and investors can look at something and say, okay, this is what I want to invest in. Having a sustainable and participative system economics through technology and new demand creation. And also here again, it's listening to the community and having the community be a part of, an additive and important part of that process. And total transparency, accountability, participation delivered through best-in-class ESG and technology methods. Again, so this is why the stream monitoring is so important, right? It seems like such a small thing, but in fact it's huge. And that, funding initiative like that becomes the building block that everything else builds on, because it provides transparency, it provides accountability, it provides participation, and it is using ESG values and principles. And so with that, I'm going to hand off to Junior, who has some remarks from the community. Junior, can you make sure to unmute yourself?
Junior, are you there?
Junior's got to unmute on his end. Unmute it on our end.
Okay, we can.
Okay, we can hear you.
Hello?
Can hear you.
Can you see him?
Let me
I can also stop sharing.
Unmute your video.
Our video is off. Our video is on our side.
Oh, I no longer receiving.
No.
Unmute it on your side.
Video is off.
Yeah, we don't know why our video is. We were on and then we were. I don't know what happened.
Can you try and unmute again? Video. Okay.
Now the audio is muted.
Oh, okay. And then now unmute your audio. Now we cannot hear you. Okay, there you go. Okay, we can see and hear you now.
Hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Hey, right on, mahalo. Yeah, aloha, my name is Jerome Kikivi Jr., and I am the president of Namoku Aupuni Oko'olahui. We are an IRS 501c3 nonprofit whose members are the lineal descendants and current residents of Kenai Wailuanui. We grow taro, fish, hunt, and gather to feed our families as a way of life. When you look at the map showing 33,000 acres of state lands, where much of the EMI ditch system water comes from, that's where our ancestors lived, and that's where we, their descendants, still live today. The EMI ditch system is like a 100-year-old rundown jalopy. It is miles and miles of leaky, broken down Jimmy rig pipes, tunnels, flumes, siphons, intakes, sluice gates, and dams. Overall, it is in poor condition, not well maintained, with many abandoned reservoirs. Available data demonstrates beyond a doubt that the system is chronically inefficient, wasting precious resources, and nobody's really getting a full measure of satisfaction out of it. Not the surrounding landowners, public trust state of Hawaii, not the county and its upcountry small farmer customers, not the ranchers, not the large agribusiness company Mahipono, not OHA and Hawaiian homelands, public trust whose beneficiaries have vested interests. Water was restored to our town farmers who eligible beneficiaries of this latter public trust after a 30-year legal battle. But they live under the threat of these gains eroded by systematic dysfunction. The system as currently operated is a huge environmental, social, cultural, economic, and governance liability for all concerned. So we want to thank those who took leadership in seeing this study through. It is an opportunity for all of us to join together and make transformative change for a higher good, to leave a good legacy for our future generations. It followed the IoTask recommendation would transform this old, decrepit jalopy into a state-of-the-art conveyance for the public good, driven by values of healthy environment, responsible government, and pro-social outcomes. Our community supports the study's overall approach. Having said that, we want to make it clear that we fought for our water and would strongly oppose any effort to reduce our allocation under the current interim in-stream flow standards. We understand that a better managed system would benefit everyone, and we support that outcome. Ultimately, the people of East Maui would like to manage the system as co-managers and co-trustees. A lot went into these recommendations, into developing a 10-year methodical and comprehensive roadmap that the county, in partnership with communities and other stakeholders, would follow to accomplish a state-of-the-art transformation. Successful execution of this plan would require stable, sustained, visionary, enlightened leadership over a long period of time by policymakers, elected officials, and communities. It would require skilled planners, engineers, hydrologists, economists, and other experts. It would require maximum ongoing engagement with community stakeholders as equals. It would require a commitment for the long haul. We understand it is very challenging to see long-term plans through to completion when key decision makers are elected officials whose terms may be interrupted midstream. But we did it. Our community did it. Our families led the fight for restoration of water. They dug in and sustained their fight to restore water to the East Maui watershed over many decades. Many of our kupuna died along the way, but we did not give up because to us, the sacrifice was our duty and kuleana for the good of the people and the environment. We continued our striving because we knew it was for the good of future generations, not for only children, but for Maui's children, for Hawaii's children. So if our little village of town farmers can do it, so can other leaders who care do it. It is so critical for the future well-being of us all. If together we can commit to carrying out the plan laid out in this report while remaining flexible and responsive to one another, we will support it. Current management and oversight is outdated, inefficient, and a tragic waste of precious resources. It's time for a change. We are open to partnering and training with tech-savvy people to monitor stream flows and collect other relevant data throughout our ahupua'a. Our community members are developing facilities where we can host gatherings in furtherance of ahupua'a-based aina management, where we can host those who support and are willing to join us in our aina conservation efforts. The East Maui watershed lands are overwhelmed with invasives. The ditch system is in a severely degraded state. We support community-inspired efforts to reform the status quo. Mahalo.
Hello, Mr. Kikivi.
Thank you, Junior. Ian was going to finish up. I'm going to share my screen again just to show where we're at. Can you folks see it?
Ian may have.
Can you folks hear me?
We'll have to mute.
You guys hear me?
Still getting some reverb.
Can you hear me now?
I believe Shay needs to turn off her volume.
There we go. No feedback. So
That's much better.
thank you, Junior. There, we can see the slide. So I just wanted to wrap up, if everybody can hear me okay, and following up with what Junior Kehive said about the vision. And I think one of the main things we need to look at is, look at there is 200 slides in this presentation that you guys have. There's lots of elements to it. There's lots of details to it. And we really need to work together as a community to sort of figure out which elements of the vision we want to adopt. Where do we want to be again for a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And really, are we ready to start today? And I think going back to what Junior was saying, we really need to look at, can we carry out a plan that actually, while remaining flexible, responsive to the community, and basically look at how can we adopt technologies, how can we look at sort of best practices, and doing it in a way that actually benefits the community first and foremost. And I think that if the model that we actually tried to implement, I think we're relatively successful with our summit, was having a summit that was actually driven by community input with outside expertise and practitioners in ESG. And that's the same thing we're trying to do here with this proposal and with this report. And I think if I go back to what some of the other folks actually talked about earlier, and the question, the one the council members asked about the water rights and what Professor Sarma said about building trust through data, and actually building to know actually what is going on, with our streams. And I also want to say that this type of technology also goes beyond building in the community for what the community actually wants. The utilization of it, which a number of other speakers actually said, goes beyond just stream monitoring, water monitoring. It goes to other areas. And I think if we look at not only what we're dealing with the stream waters, but also with COVID-19, really we're in a situation now where data and understanding what's going on in our communities is vitally important. Everybody looks at the reports every day of how many cases we have. So from our leadership and the leadership of the council moving forward, we really need to look at how we can actually best use data. If you can go to the next slide. There's there's quite a few different options, and again, the options should be, driven by the community, what the community needs are. But I think one of the fundamental needs that I wanted to mention, and we talked about this before, is the need to actually create jobs. As I'm sure all of you know, Maui Island actually had the highest unemployment rate in the country for a while there. I think we're doing a little bit better now. And by my estimates and estimates of others, we need to create upwards of 10,000 new jobs in Maui, which is more than we've ever done before over the last 30 years. With this slide here, just looking at some of the options that we can move forward with this report and building other things, as mentioned 3 here that are talked about. Look at the complete economic development package, basically actually floating the county bond to provide capital. And as I think we all know, that interest rates are now the lowest they've been historically. So the county actually can access, cheap capital. Of course, we have to get into the details if that's revenue bonds or general fund bonds or whatever it happens to be. But that's one area to sort of go and look at, can we have a large fund that the county can use in partnership with private sector investors to basically use the proceeds to invest in portfolio programs and kind of realize a complete vision for Maui. The other item we have here is the Center for Excellence, which was mentioned by both professors and other folks in this presentation. And I think something that the professor from MIT said, Professor Sarma, and that he actually brought up to us in the process of doing this report, is that there is actually a need globally for a Center for Excellence dealing with freshwater watersheds. And there's a need to sort of really study that, both from the point of view of what our needs are in Hawaii and also global needs as far as tracking climate change. So that's something that we can actually sort of build on with this data collection, and actually have something where Maui leads the way in that area. And there's a lot of other applications that we can do. One of which I'll just mention that we've been pursuing is basically using satellite imagery that I believe the professor also talked about to build a system for crop insurance that we have in the United States, but we can also be able to build that here and deploy that in the Pacific Asia region to create jobs here. And the final thing, the shovel-ready innovation program, and the thing we've been talking about with the sensors and collecting the stream data and the water data is one good example of that. And what Gita was talking about, cloud-to-cloud smart community data. This is something we can actually get started right away with the community and create jobs and also create technology that the community can have a stake in and be able to have a residual value that sort of remains in the community, and we develop value around that. And then one other point I'll make about that is I know there's other community initiatives right now dealing with home care and looking at ways to employ people who have actually been working in the hotels in other ways, and home care is one. And there's ways to actually use the technology, again, the sensor technology, to sort of have cutting edge technology in healthcare that we can train our local people in and be able to create additional jobs and also the residual value of the technology going to the community. So I think bottom line is, I know from the leadership the Maui Council has shown in all sorts of areas, everything from how good a job you guys did in the whole budget session to the leadership you've taken in dealing with the immediate community needs. I think definitely Maui County Council can definitely lead the way in this with the support, hopefully, of the state and outside investors. And finally, I think, as going back to what Junior said and to what others have said, is this is a process that needs to be driven by the community. And again, this entire report is a template to sort of be worked with and gone over by you folks as community leaders, elected officials, and as the community as a way to kind of look at a way to go forward. So thank you so much.
Mahalo, Ian. Mahalo, Shay. Members, before we take any questions, I just wanted to gauge how you're feeling. We've reached the mid-meeting mark, and did you need a couple minutes pause for the cause before we go into questions?